Welcome to Module 3 of the Rapid Takeoff and Estimate Software Skills course. In this module, you'll learn how to import your Plans Express plans to build an estimate in Estimator Express. I'll show you how to estimate preliminary costs such as site establishment and travel costs, and also how to add subcontract quotations to your estimate. It's worth noting before we begin that ideally you want to complete your plans before importing them into Estimator Express. It is possible to re-import your plans if you subsequently adapt them, but any changes you've made within the estimating calculators will be overwritten. Hopefully you've already opened up Estimator Express. Click My Estimates to create your estimate. This will open the My Jobs screen. My Jobs contains all of the jobs you're working on or have created in the past. I'll just do a quick run through of the top menu before we make a new estimate. So first of all, we've got the Close button. That will return you to the main menu. Then we've got the Open Estimate button. Use this option to open an existing estimate. Next, we've got the New Estimate button. Obviously, you would use this option to start a new estimate using the Estimate Wizard. Then we've got the Copy Estimate button. You can make a copy of an existing estimate, and there's two typical reasons that you might want to do this. First of all, you might want to make adjustments to an existing estimate, but want to keep the original version intact. Making a copy means that you can do this. The other reason you might want to copy an estimate is if you have a job to estimate that's very similar or even the same as a previous estimate. So you can make a copy and then add your new customer's address details. On the next button, we've got the Delete Estimate button. This will delete the estimate from your computer, so you really need to use it with care. Once it's been deleted, unless you've made a backup, it's gone for good. The next button is the Edit Estimate Details button. This button allows you to change the name, the description, and the number of a job if you need to. Next, we've got the Job Status button. This allows you to set different statuses for your jobs. This can be really useful when you've got a long list of jobs, and it allows you to see where your jobs are up to and measure success. There are 6 different job status choices. So we've got Estimate in Progress. That means you're still estimating. We've got Awaiting Customer Reply, which means you've shown your quote to the customer and you're waiting for them to give you the go-ahead. We've got Due to Start, which means you've won the job but you haven't yet started it. In Progress means the construction has been started. Completed obviously means the job's done. And finally, there is a job status for unsuccessful estimates, when you don't win the job. I'm sure you won't have many of those. So as the job progresses, you can alter the job status to give you a visual indication of what stage each job is up to. Next on the menu, we've got the Import Backup Estimates button. Use this button to back up your data. Obviously, that's really important. You can also use this option to import estimates that you've previously backed up. So it's a way of saving and protecting your data. It's also a way to save an estimate that you want to import onto another computer that's already running Estimator Express. Next, we've got the Reorder Estimates button. Use that button to sort your estimates, so you can order them alphabetically, by date, by number. It's up to you. Next, we've got the Get Materials Quote button. You can use this button to request a material quote for your windows and doors from Crystal Direct. We've got the Find button, which you can use to search for a particular job in your list. And finally, we've got the Status drop-down, which allows you to filter the My Job screen to show jobs of a particular status. Okay, so to complete your import of your Plans Express plans and create a new estimate, you need to click the New Estimate button. And when we do that, you'll see there are 4 different ways of creating an estimate in Estimator Express. So I'll quickly run through those. If you have purchased the Quick Quote plugin, you can use Quick Quote to estimate using a standard job template. You can also use Quick Quote to estimate more complex custom estimates. You might use that for renovation jobs or non-standard builds. You can import plans from Plans Express for rapid takeoff and estimating, which is what we're doing today. And finally, you can produce a custom estimate from scratch using estimating calculators. So for now, click the Plans Express Import for Rapid Takeoff option. So next, a window pops up prompting you to locate the Plans Express drawing file. So you need to locate the Plans Express file that you have saved. So I've saved it on my desktop to find it easily. The file will have a .pxd extension. So locate that file called 6 Pennine Lane, click on the file to select it, and then click Open. And then the new estimate wizard will pop up. So here you need to enter several bits of information about the job. So first of all, you need to give it a name. So let's call it 6 Pennine Lane. That's the address of the property. The job name could be the address, or it could be the client's name, whatever's meaningful to you. Next, you can select a job description. When you click the drop down there are a number of different options that you can choose from, or you can type in your own description. The job description will appear in the customer quote, so make sure you spell it correctly. You don't want any typos in there. For today, we're going to select the extension job description. The job number is automatically assigned, and it will be one more than the last job number. You can type in your own number if you want to, as long as it's one that hasn't been used before. Click where it says customer address. Here we can fill in the client's name and contact details. These details can be changed later, but it's important that you fill them out at some point and make sure you fill them in correctly, because they will appear on the customer quote. And obviously spelling the customer's name is not something you want to be doing. So let's type in the customer's name. For this example, let's say it's Mr. and Mrs. Hurst. And we're going to put their address in, 6 Pennine Lane, Repton, Derbyshire, DE18 5HY. And if the site address details are the same as the client's address details, you want to tick this box here. It will copy these details across to the site address. Then click Update. So you can see the site address has been filled out here too. Now let's move along to the price book section of the new estimate wizard. Here it's asking you to select a price book. This should always be the master price book, which should now be set up with the prices reflecting what you pay, so you can leave the master price book selected. Now we need to select a group of workbooks. Workbooks are the estimating calculator used to price up your job. There's a number of different groups of workbooks already set up in Estimator Express, which are tailored to different types of job. When importing a Plans Express file for rapid takeoff, the Plans Express import group of workbooks will automatically be selected, as you can see here. This will add all of the workbooks which aren't typically included in your drawing, so things such as site preliminaries and subcontractors. They will be added to your estimate. You'll have the opportunity to add any other workbooks you need once you've created the estimate, and you can also delete any you don't need. So you just need to make sure that Plans Express import group of workbooks is selected. After that then, we can set the start date for the job and choose the default bar chart, which is often known as a Gantt chart. To set the start date, click on the drop down box, and then you can click through the months and click on a date on the calendar. If you select a start date of a Monday, then you'll get a full week on the bar chart. If you don't know the start date for your job, which is often the case when you're first dealing with a client, then this can be changed at a later point whilst your estimate's been worked on. So for practice purposes today, just select any month and date. Once you've done that, we can select a chart type. So click on the chart type drop down box. We're going to select the small extension bar chart. The charts that you choose aren't generated from the estimate. They're actually typical build programs for a particular type of job. We'll look at these in more detail in Module 4. Now moving over to the right, we can select a specification for the estimate. For this job, click on the drop down box and select the extension specification. If you'd spent some time setting up your own specification for this type of job, you would select it at this point. So as you may recall, the extension specification will use plant appropriate for work where space is limited, so it'll use mini diggers rather than JCBs. It'll also allow more time to complete the different labour tasks than the new build specification would, for example. So once you've selected your main specification, you can further refine the specification of the job by selecting mini specs from the options below. So for our example today, we're going to select a 70p facing brick for an extension or renovation job. From the roof tiling drop-down box, we're going to select the pan tile for extension or renovation option. For the roof guttering, click on the drop-down box, select the top option, the plastic half-round gutter. And for the fascias and barge boards and soffits to sloped roofs, click on the drop-down box. We're going to select the UPVC fascias, barge boards and soffits option. You can leave the bottom three options set to same as the specification. Once you've done that, you can review the profit markup by clicking the Review Profit Markup button. The figures you see in your estimate whilst you're estimating are actual costs. You can set the percentage profit markup you want to achieve for each type of resource here as you create your estimate. You can also amend the profit markup at a later point once you've completed your estimate. So once you've reviewed your profit markup for this particular estimate, click Close. And again, you can review the inflation rates for this job. If you don't intend to apply inflation to your quote, then changing the figures here won't have any impact on your quote. So once you've reviewed your inflation rates for this job, click Close. So once you're happy with all of your selections, you can click the Create Estimate button. And that's when it's time for a quick tea break, because it will take a few moments to do that. Estimator Express produces the estimate in just a few minutes by taking off the dimensions from your Plans Express drawing and combining them with the specification, mini specs and price book you've selected. Once the lintels have been specified, you'll find yourself looking at the job summary screen. Treat this as the home page of your estimate. We can see the cost of each component and the total cost of the extension at the bottom. At the top of the summary screen, you'll see all of the components of the extension which have been estimated based on the plans we've imported. So we've got wall starters, the structural opening, the window, the floor slab, the cut roof and so on. Further down the screen we've got a number of other estimating calculators, or workbooks as we call them, which can't be estimated from the plans. So we've got things such as site establishment, along with other things such as walk-in bay windows. Before we take a closer look at the estimate, we're going to have a look through the menu and the assorted tabs that you can see at the top of the screen. So first of all, we'll go through the top menu. We've got the Close button. If you click that, it'll take you back to the My Job screen. We've got the Open Workbook button. If you click on a workbook calculator from the list and then press the Open Workbook button, it will open up the workbook. We've got the Add Workbook button. You click this option to add workbooks to the job which aren't already in the summary list. When you click Add Workbook, you're presented with a list that you can pick workbooks from. Let's just quickly practice doing that. First of all, click on the workbook at the top of the list and then click the Add Workbook button. Any workbooks you add will appear above the workbook which is selected, so it'll add the workbooks to the top of the screen here. So here you'll see we've got the Add Workbooks window. You can click the Workbook Type drop-down to filter the workbooks to show only the workbooks of a certain type that you can add to your estimate. So I've selected doors, so I can see a list of all the door workbooks which aren't already in my job summary list. If I go back to Workbook Type and scroll up, I can select all once again. You can also use this keyword box here to search for a particular workbook. So click into the keyword box and type travel into that box. Don't don't click the enter key after you've typed the word in. It's very tempting to do that, but if you press the enter key, what it will do actually is click this select button, and it will take you out of the Add Workbook window. So don't press enter, type in that word travel, and then just pause for a moment, and then you'll see that the list of workbooks is filtered to show only those that have got the word travel in it. You can then tick that workbook to indicate that you want to add it to your job. We're also going to locate another couple of workbooks while we're here. So click back into the keyword box, highlight the text in there, and overtype with sundry. We're going to locate a workbook called Sundry Plant. So type in sundry and then just pause for a moment, wait for it to locate the workbook we need. So that's the Sundry Plant workbook. And we also want the Planning and Design Costs workbook. So if we type in planning, after a moment it will find that workbook that we need. So once you've ticked them, they will remain in your list even if you're searching for other keywords there. So once you've located all the workbooks you want to add to your estimate, click the select button, and then they'll appear in your job summary above the workbook which was originally selected. If you can't find a workbook in that Add Workbook window there, it means it's already in the estimate. Okay, so the next button we've got on the top menu is the Delete Workbook button. You won't be surprised to learn that if you click that button, you will delete the selected workbook from the job summary list. You can do this if you want to make the list smaller and easier to read if there's workbooks you're not using. If you do delete a workbook by mistake, you can just go back to the Add Workbook button and add it back into the estimate, so it's not the end of the world. The next button along is the Recalculate Estimate button. This option is used to correct an estimate. Typically that's necessary if you've changed the price of a resource partway through an estimate. Then we've got the Save button. This allows you to save the data on the job summary screen. We'll skip over the next couple of buttons, and then we've got the Import Plans Express Plan button. This option allows you to re-import a Plans Express drawing into the estimate. So once you've created the estimate, if you make changes to the plans, you can re-import them using this button here. Typically you do that if you need to make a modification to your drawing. You could then import the drawing and amend the estimate. Note though that when you do that, any changes you've made to any of the workbooks within the estimate will be overwritten because a new copy of each workbook is created upon importing. Then we've got the Run Quick Quote button. If you've estimated using Quick Quote, you can rerun and edit your Quick Quote that way. Not relevant to us today. Then we've got the Sort Workbooks button. This option allows you to move workbooks up and down the list, so they're in a different position on the job summary. You can also use this option to save a new group of workbooks to suit you. So if you've tailored your estimate and want to save the set of workbooks you've got, you can do that using the Sort Workbooks button. Then finally we'll just talk about the Find button. You use this button when your eyes are starting to hurt from trying to find something on screen. Click the Find button, type in a keyword, and you'll be able to locate it really quickly. Okay, so that's all of the options on the top menu. Now let's have a look at the tabs, which are just underneath the top menu. So of course the Summary tab is where we are now. So this is where all of your workbooks for the job are located. As I mentioned earlier, this is the home page of your estimate. If you're stuck, not sure where you're up to, clicking on the Summary tab will bring you back here, and then you can click Close and return to My Jobs. So the next tab along is the Pricebook tab. Click the Pricebook tab and select the Materials section. The Pricebook here is a copy of the Master Pricebook. This means that you can go into the Pricebook in the estimate and alter the prices for this particular job if needs be. The changes you make within this estimate Pricebook will not affect any other estimates or your Master Pricebook. So this allows you to have unique pricing for a job if necessary. The flip side of this is that you might see a price for a resource that's wrong in an estimate and you do want to change it universally. So for example, you want to change the price of an item in the estimate, but it also needs to be changed in the Master Pricebook. You can do that using the Synchronize button we've got here. We're not going to go through it right now, but just to explain that when you click that button, you'll be presented with some options about which sections of the price book you want to synchronize, whether you want to synchronize all resources or just new ones if you've just added them in. And it also allows you to select in which direction you want to synchronize the price book, i.e. whether you want to copy the changes from the job price book into the master price book, or if you want to copy them from the master price book into the job price book. So that's an important function to know about in the price book. Next, we've got the spec tab or the specification tab. Just like the price book, this is a copy of the specification that we chose in the estimate wizard. You can change items in this specification and they will only affect this estimate. This is the best way to make changes to materials for this particular estimate. If you want to make changes to the materials, you need to do that in the spec so that they are used in all of the relevant workbooks in the estimate. You can also change the mini specs that you've selected from in here. You'll see that the specification menu is pretty much the same as it was when we looked at it in Module 2, but there are a few extra options on the job specification menu, so I'll just show you those. We've got the Apply Spec button. If you make a change to the spec, clicking on this button will run through all of the workbooks that have been used and change the relevant data to match the changes you've made in the specification. So once you've made a specification change, don't forget to click that Apply Spec button. Next, we've got the Library button. If you click on this button, you will see the list of all the original specifications, and you can select a different one if you think you've chosen the wrong specification when you've created the job. Then we've got the Save Spec button. If you've modified some items in this specification, you can save those changes for future use. When you save the spec, you can either overwrite the original, thus updating and improving that specification for the next time you use it, or you can make a new one with a new name. You do the latter if you've made a set of changes that are specific to a certain type of job that you think you might come across in the future. And then finally, we've got the Check Lintels and Cavity Closers in Estimate button. This option will bring up the lintels and cavity closer screen that we've just seen when we created our estimate. So if you realise you need to change your lintels and cavity closers, you can click here to load the lintel and cavity closer checker. Okay, so for now, let's click on the Summary tab to jump back to the job summary screen. We'll be looking at the other tabs later on in Module 4. Okay, let's take a look at the estimate in a bit more detail now. Let's start by looking at the part of the estimate which deals with the external walls. So if we click on the Brick and Block Cavity Wall Workbook and then click Open Workbook, and we'll then need to open the External Wall Worksheet. So if we click on the External Walls Worksheet and click Open Worksheet, and you'll see here in the Dimensions screen, we've got 3 columns of dimensions, one for each of the extension walls. If you look down the screen, you can see all of the dimensions for the walls. So we can see the length of the wall, the height of the wall, any areas of opening in the walls. So that's the total area of structural openings, doors and windows. Here we can see the foundations and the footing details. And then we can see the plastering and decoration and insulation options that we selected. Further down the screen, we can see that Estimator Express has calculated the total area of each wall, the total area of gable for each of the side walls as well. It's important to note that we're just looking at the information within the workbook. If you want to make changes to any of these dimensions or estimating options, you should only make them if you're sure you're not going to re-import the drawing. If you want to make significant changes, you should really go back to the drawing in Plans Express and save and re-import that drawing. When you re-import the drawing, any changes you've made within these workbooks will be overwritten. If you want to make any changes to dimensions or estimating options, you're better off doing it within the original drawing. If we scroll back to the top of the screen, if you want to take a closer look at the material, labour and plant resources which have been specified and have a look at their quantities and costs, then click the View Resources Output button. In the Resources Output screen, you can see all of the items that have been included in the estimate for our brick and block cavity walls. So we'll see for the facing bricks that 70p mini spec that we selected has been applied. You can change the specified resources here if you need to, or the rates of production, but we suggest you make the changes within the job specification, which can be found by clicking the Spec tab here. Again, it's better to make changes within the job specification rather than the workbook, because if you re-import the drawing, as I mentioned before, the workbook will be overwritten and any changes to the resources will be lost. The specification, however, is not overwritten when you re-import a drawing, so any changes you make to the specification will be retained. So once you've had a close look at the brick and block cavity wall and everything that's been estimated for those walls, we're going to close the workbook and return to the job summary screen. So first we need to click the back button and then click close and close again. When you close out of a workbook in that way, you will be asked, is the workbook complete? Click yes. If you think you might need to come back to this workbook and change things later on, click no. If you click yes, you'll see that this marker here appears saying that that workbook is completed. This is purely for your information. You can still go in and out of the workbook as much as you want to. If you think you've set the completed marker incorrectly, then you can right-click on that workbook and select the Toggle Workbook Complete option, and that will set it. It will remove the completed marker. You can also use this comments column here to write any notes or reminders about anything you might need to look at or something that you might need to add to a workbook. Okay, so that's the brick and block cavity walls. Now let's have a quick look at our Leanto roof. So find the workbook called Plans Express Cut Roof and then open the workbook. I'm going to right click and select Open Workbook this time. You can use the right click menu or the buttons on the top menu. Once this workbook opens up, you'll see that there are two separate worksheets, one for the roof and one for the vaulted ceiling. The vaulted ceiling worksheet simply estimates the noggins between the rafters, the plastering and the decoration to the vaulted ceiling. We're going to open up the main roof worksheet. So click on main roof, open the worksheet, and here you'll see that Estimator Express has taken off all of the dimensions from the Plans Express drawing and fed them into the estimate. You may find it easier to absorb the information if you click on the column and click the DIMS wizard button. Here you can review the dimensions on diagrams. As with the walls, only use the workbook to look at the data. If you need to make changes, you should make the changes in Plans Express and re-import the drawing. Unless, of course, you're absolutely confident that you're not going to need to re-import the drawing at a later point because you don't want to lose any changes that you've made within the workbook. Let's click Cancel to close the DIMS wizard. Finally, we'll have a look at the resources in detail. So click the View Resources Output button and you'll see that Estimator Express has calculated all of the timbers. So we've got everything from rafters, gable ladder rafters, noggins, wall plate, roof ridge, and so on. Included in the estimate are the UPVC fascias and barge boards we specified as well. So here we can see the PVCU options that we selected. If you scroll down the screen, you'll see the tiles we selected when we chose the mini spec are correct. So we've got the modern pan tile mini spec that we selected. Of course, the felt and the tile nails have also been calculated too. Again, if you want to change any of the specified resources or rates of production, you would want to do that in the job specification, which is accessed using that spec tab there. If we just have a quick scroll down the screen, we'll also see that we've got the gutter we specified here, plastic half round gutter, and all of the associated components as per the mini spec that we selected. The quickest way of getting back to the summary screen is to click the Summary tab. That will take us directly to the job summary screen. We won't be asked if the workbook's complete if we navigate in that way, but of course you can right click and set the workbook to be completed that way. Now let's take a look at the window estimate. Click on the PVCU Windows 1200 Deep workbook and open it up. Click on the worksheet and open that worksheet up. You'll see from the dimensions here that this is a 600 by 1200 window. Let's have a look at the resources that have been specified for our window. So in this workbook we have some calculated items in the top section. Items such as fixings and finishings, so we've got plaster, silicone, decoration and so on, they're all estimated here. And that includes both the labour and the materials. If we scroll down the screen, you'll see we've got this different section at the bottom here called the sundry items. These items are not calculated items. These are lines which are pre-filled with appropriate figures. So because this is a 600 by 1200 window worksheet, we've got a 600 by 1200 window specified, and there's just the one of them. We've got a 900mm lintel specified as well, which is appropriate for our 600 wide window, and there's one of them again. We have cavity closers, and we have the labourers to fix the window and the glazing. The quantity per item column here is white, you might have noticed, and that means you can type figures into it or zero them out if necessary. So a scenario that we hear about quite often is that you as a builder form the opening and subcontract out the glazing to a third-party glazer. If that's the case, you can set the window quantity. I'm just going to select the highlight selected line tool. So you can see for the window we can zero that out because the third-party glazer is going to fit the window. Then you can also zero out the labour to fix the window and the glazing. Again, that's going to be done by the third-party glazer. So what you've done there is you've removed the PVCU elements which the third-party contractor is supplying and fitting. You can set any of the sundry items to zero. You'll see we still have a cost of £237 up here. That's the cost to form the opening, to plaster, to decorate and make good. That's the cost to you as a builder to fit the window. You would then add the cost of supplying and fitting the window as a subcontract cost in the subcontractor quotation workbook, and I'll show you how to do that shortly. Again, just to reiterate, you should only make these types of changes to a workbook once you've finished your drawing, as if you re-import the drawing, all of these changes will be overwritten. Okay, so I'm going to click Summary to return to the job summary once again. Now let's add some preliminary and subcontract costs to the estimate. If you can see a workbook called Design Costs, delete it. Click the Delete button and say yes, you want to delete it. That's an old workbook. A few workbooks have been updated recently, and the workbook we want to use is this one at the top here called Planning and Design Costs. So if you click on that Planning and Design Costs workbook and then click Open Workbook, we're going to do some estimating for the planning and design costs. So this dialog box will pop up asking if you want to change the name of the worksheet and the location of it. I'm happy with the default, so I'm going to click OK, but you can change them if you feel you need to. And you'll then be presented with a list of different dimensional templates for different sizes of job. These will speed up the estimating process because they will lead you to a dimensions wizard with different default values entered. So obviously your design and planning costs are likely to be different for a small extension than for a new house. So we're going to select the small home extension template and then click Select. So here you can see we've got 7 different costs that you might incur in a job. We've got some default figures included here, but of course you can change them as necessary. So perhaps your architect's fees are £400, not £500. Or perhaps you've got some structural engineers' fees which come to £500. Just overwrite those figures as required. Once you've done that, simply click Finish. So that's how you add your planning and design costs to your estimate. Click the Summary tab to go back to the job summary. And we're now going to have a look at the Site Establishment Workbook. On my screen it's about a third of the way down the list. So click on the Site Establishment Workbook and click Open Workbook. The Site Establishment Workbook is full of preliminary costs, many of which are often forgotten, we find, and can leave builders really seriously out of pocket. Once the workbook has opened up, again you can review the worksheet name and location, click OK to accept the defaults, and once again you're given a list of different dimensional templates which are suitable for different sizes of job. We're going to select the Site Establishment for Small extension template. Once you've selected the template you want to use, click Select. So this workbook deals with the creation of a site compound, if appropriate, the cost of welfare items like a site cabin and toilet, some sundry skip permit costs, insurance, and health and safety costs. As you can see, most of the items here are bought in units of time. What this does mean is that you may need to come back to this workbook later on once you've got a firmer idea of the duration of the job. So if we set our site cabin to 12 weeks hire and the toilet to 12 weeks hire, let's set the security fencing to 0 because we don't need any on our extension, and the duration of hire to 0 for the fencing. We don't need a JCB to clear the site. We're not setting up a site compound, so we don't need any labourers' hours to do that. And let's say we're not clearing the site, so we don't need a skip for site clearance. So once you've filled out those options, click Next. Now if you were working on a new build project, you'd very likely be making a site compound. If you were, then you would enter the dimensions of the site compound here. We can leave them set to 0 for our extension and click Next. And here we've got a few other sundry project costs. So let's assume that no skip permit is required. We'll set that to 0. You would of course change these to suit each job. Then we've got the insurance costs. This allows you to apportion some of your annual insurance costs to this particular job. We've got an allowance for site security costs, health and safety costs. This covers things like signage, PPE and health and safety consultation, or maybe software, health and safety software costs incurred for this particular job. Put in any figures you like into these boxes. Once you're done, click Finish. And once again we'll click the Summary tab to return to the job summary. Next we're going to have a look at some other aspects of an estimate which can easily be overlooked. Sundry plant costs. So if you click on the Sundry Plant Workbook, it should be right near the top of the list because we added it in at the top, and then open up the workbook. In the box that pops up, click OK to accept the suggested worksheet name and location. As with the previous workbooks, we're now given a list of different dimensional templates for different sizes of job. These will have different default values entered for different sizes of job, and again they should speed up the process. So select the small single story extension template and click Select. Now the Sundry Plant Workbook is a long list of assorted equipment and plant that you may hire or buy for a job. So this first screen deals with sundry plant hire. All you need to do is enter the number of weeks that each item will be hired for, and then click Next. So you can use the Tab key on your keyboard to move between the different boxes and enter the number of weeks that each piece of equipment is required for. Once you've done that and updated them as required, click Next. The next screen is all about tool and plant purchases. So the costs of all of these items come out of your back pocket, and you need to attribute the relevant ones to this estimate. Take a minute or two to have a look at the list. We don't need to put any figures in today unless you want to. Just take a look at the different equipment and tool items that you can add to your estimate, and then click Next. The final screen is where you estimate your spoil and waste plant hire. When you've entered what you need, again, click Finish. So that's where you would estimate additional plant and tool hire. Click the Summary tab again to return to the job summary. Now we'll open up the next workbook in the list, the Travel Costs Workbook. Click on travel costs, then click Open Workbook. Click OK to the suggested name and location for the worksheet. In this workbook there's only one dimensional template, so click on that. Click Select to open it. Okay, so in the travel costs workbook, the top 3 boxes here are for different sizes of van. So a small van is something like an Escort or a Focus sized van. A medium van is like a standard transit van. And a large van would be a long wheelbase van or a Luton type vehicle. So start by selecting the van that suits you first. Then think about how many miles per day you will travel to and from the site, and then how many days you'll be on site. So for example, say I've got a medium-sized van and my journey to site is 5 miles. So that means I'll be travelling 10 miles a day in my van. The job I'm working on is 3 months long. So if I work on the basis of 20 working days per month, that's 60 days travelling 10 miles. So I'm going to do 600 miles during the course of the job. It adds up really quickly, doesn't it, when you think about it like that? So I have typed 600 miles into my travel costs for a medium-sized van. If I had 2 identical vehicles doing the same mileage, I'd simply double the quantity, so I'd enter 1200 miles here. We'll see what those 600 miles equate to in a moment. So once you've filled in your mileage here, now have a look at whether there are any daily parking fees you need to add to the estimate or congestion charges. Of course, these can be significant, they can really add up, so you need to take them into account. Once you're done, click Finish. And then we're going to click View Resources Output to see what those 600 miles have added up to. So here on the second line down, we can see that for our medium-sized van, those 600 miles equate to £420. That's based on 70 pence a mile. That goes towards fuel, wear and tear, and also vehicle depreciation. If you don't take this into account, you're going to be several £1000s out of pocket every year for each van that you have. So it's really important that you add this onto your estimate. Once you're happy that you've accounted for all of your travel costs, click the Summary tab. Finally then, let's take a look at the Subcontract Quotations workbook. You'll locate this towards the bottom of the list. Click on Subcontract Quotations and open the workbook up. Click on the Subcontract Quotations worksheet and open the worksheet up. Now a dialog box pops up. You want to enter the number 1 into here. What this means is that you will have 1 lot of each subcontract quotation added to your estimate. If you wanted to multiply all your costs by 2, you could enter 2, but usually you want to set the number of items to 1. Once you've done that, click OK. So you can see we've got a list of different subcontract quotation types, and they're all set to £1. You might remember this from the price book. So let's pick the plumbing first fix quotation. So in our extension example, we discussed the fact that we might need to add 2 radiators and of course the piping. So you may have a subcontract plumber who's going to come in and supply and fit the radiators and connect them to the existing system for £750. So what you would do is type 750 into the quantity per item column here. If you see any hashtags appear like this, don't worry, just right click and click the auto fit option. It will expand the column so that you can see the figures in there. You can see that subcontract quotation of £750 has been added to the estimate. If we were to use the earlier example of the PVCU window subcontractor, we might put this in as a specialist quotation. So again, you just type the cost into the quantity per item column. So let's say supplying fit cost for that window was £400. Right click and auto fit if you see any hashtags appear. So use this workbook when you're subcontracting out some work and the subcontractor is doing the work at a set price. You will of course be making a profit on top of this. Once you're finished with this workbook, click the Summary tab to return to the summary screen and then scroll back up to the top of the screen. To complete your estimate, you would use the remaining workbooks as a checklist. Work your way down the summary screen, going into a workbook if you think you need to enter data for it. If you come to a workbook which you don't need, for example, we don't need a fitted kitchen, then you can either ignore the workbook. As you can see, there's no costs associated with it until you open it up and put some figures in. If you'd prefer, you can delete it from the job summary altogether. The easiest thing to do is just to ignore it. Continue working your way down the list until you're confident that everything is accounted for. Of course, you can add workbooks in if you need to. So for example, plumbing and heating, electrics, bathrooms and so on. If you haven't drawn them in Plans Express, you can add them to your estimate here. Any new workbooks you estimate will not be affected if you re-import your Plans Express drawing. Remember, if you need to make a significant design change, the best way to do that would be to edit your original plans and re-import the drawing using the Import Plans Express Plan button. However, if you realise that you've missed something off that's rather small from your drawing, for example wall starters, it may be quicker just to add it into the estimate rather than editing your drawing and re-importing it. So that concludes Module 3.